Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to first thank for this honorable invitation from this initiative, and thank José Vilar and Rodrigo Vidal, and a pleasure to be here with João Pieroni from BNDES, with whom I had the pleasure of working with, and when I was at the Ministry of Health, how much BNDES fosters innovation in healthcare in the country. Just to provide you a few numbers before I hand over to João, BNDES has a successful history in terms of the industrial healthcare complex. Overall, between 2010 and 2019, almost 6 billion reais were invested in projects with different financial instruments. Reimbursable funds, non-reimbursable funds, the stock stakes, the ventures. So BNDES has a fundamental role in developing healthcare in the country. So I'm going to talk about fostering healthcare input, so necessary, and this pandemic has shown us how much we must have our own structure, strong industrial complex to confront that. The Ministry of Health has been contributing to this partnership with BNDES. It's very sound. And BNDES, through funds, non-reimbursable funds, for example, about 10% of the profit of BNDES is reinvested in non-reimbursable funds. So for fostering several production lines, especially of pharmaceutical products. So we have great foreign dependency. So there's an imbalance in our trade balance in this area. So I'd like to highlight a few points in this panel with João. There are specific projects today show the importance of BNDES. I'd like to take the opportunity, whilst I was at the Ministry of Health, we set up a whole structure of the Genome Project with the leadership of Dr. Camille Jareta. And BNDES, once again, has been taking part of this initiative, knowing of the importance of this industry in terms of access of the population to the public health system, to these innovations, but not only technological, but also therapeutical. I'd like to actually bring up some points to spur our discussion here with Mr. Pieroni. How much BNDES is so concerned about the IFAs in the country. So BNDES invested in Nortec so that we could have independence in this area, so critical in this area. BNDES supports the innovation and also radical innovation in the country through productive innovation, investing in development of biotechnology, that somehow brings several funds to the public health system, SUS. If we look at the success case in the country, I'd say that in the aerospace industry, Embraer is a success case. Brazil is a state-of-the-art manufacturer in terms of aircraft manufacturing. So this happened through a state project with the market and academia. It was a joint effort. I'd like to have your reflection, because when I was at the Ministry of Health, it was clear that there was great focus on production, that we would encourage local production. But we had a previous stage, which is research and development. Crucial point for us to consolidate this industrial complex in the country. And for this, we have to bring academia to our side so that we can articulate that and move forward, not only in incremental innovation and radical innovation, and that the country needs to do, as following the example of other areas, agribusiness, oil prospection, and space industry. We have human capital to do that. We have financial instruments led by BNDES. We have academia ready for that, but we need this articulation. This is a state project, not government project. I'd like to give the floor to João Pieroni. And once again, I'd like to stress the great satisfaction of being here with you today. Thank you. Thank you, Denizar. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank José and Rodrigo for the invitation to take part of the Conveya Summit. It's a pleasure to be with you, an expert in innovation in healthcare with practical experience, also at the Ministry of Health. So it's great to see you again, right, Denizar? It's been quite a while we haven't seen each other. It's great to share this moment. Denizar, I believe, taking the last point of your talk, innovation with state policy, I think this is key, because innovation, by definition, is mid-long term. It has risks, uncertainties, and it's not possible to conceive public policies that only look in the short term when we are discussing innovation, when we want to see the effects of these public policies in innovation. So this is a starting point and an assumption that we naturally, in Brazil, there is a difficulty for us to have more long-lasting policies. So we can go into more details into some of them. They are important. But first point, we must have a state policy and long-lasting. Brazil's research support and foster institutions can perform. Then we have FINEP, then we have ENTREPRENEURSHIP, bridging companies and institutions that are scientific and technological. And we have BNDES also playing part of this role, and also with a viewpoint that it can reach the market, our economy, and see a social impact of innovation at the very end. So we have a technology system in the terms of institutions and instruments that is all encompassing. We must have this vision, state, long term. We have the institutions. We have been facing difficulties regarding budget of these institutions. This also in the past few years, we have been having difficulties with the recent change of legislation that will allow FMCP to be a fund, and we expect to have more funds for science and technology in Brazil. And I'm bringing a point that you brought up. ENTREPRENEURSHIP is a successful case of this triple helix that we call it. We have it in literature. And you're totally right that we can actually reproduce this to other areas. Agribusiness is another example, using Embrapa as an anchor technological company. And we also have a lot of research and development and scientists in various areas that are very relevant in healthcare. We have companies looking at pharmaceutical companies that today are willing to take risks much more than in the past. They're moving to generic to radical implementation. And we have, in the case of health, an additional element that I believe is the potential of the purchasing power of the state to be able to leverage certain technologies. So we have the conditions to be much less dependent than we are today of pharmaceutical inputs, of products in the frontier of knowledge, biotechnological products. And we have an experience in Brazil, and you, Denizar, at the time that you were brilliantly taking care of this agenda, which is the PDPs, which was the virtuous articulation between private investment, public investment, so PPPs, actually funding from the BNDES and FINEP. And I would also add another element, which is regulatory. And Visa, so a national surveillance agency, actually playing a major role with biological products and being very active and relevant. We decided to, we actually have had an experience that had some trial and errors and got certain things right, but this allowed Brazil today, if we look back and we see the sort of film from 2010 to 2021, we had no biotechnology plant in Brazil. Today we have 4 biotechnology plants in Brazil, private to public plants. And of course, again, going back to your point, if we look at the production, we still need to bring innovation, development. And I think this is a point that we need to enhance with this kind of public policy. But I think it's proven that it's possible. I believe we have to use this example so that we can improve, bring innovation to the strategy so that we can actually make Brazil to keep not only production capacity, that this is important in the pandemic, the possibility of manufacturing vaccines in Brazil at Butantan Institute and Fiocruz Institute has allowed Brazil to have a better vaccine performance with the formulation, and in a short period of time we're going to have the active pharmaceutical inputs. We could produce the vaccine from the beginning. If we had the knowledge of the inputs before, it would have been better. So that was some step that needs to be taken. So to start a conversation here, I would bring up these points: state policy long term, for us to have institutions in healthcare. We have an environment that I believe Denizar, that is very enabling for us to aim at having companies that are as competitive in healthcare as Embraer is today in the airspace industry. Very good, João. I'd like to take this opportunity and think about the industrial complex of this partnership with the ministry with various other players, including BNDES, and you were very active in the policy of the PPPs, that no doubt there are certain adjustments that need to be made, but the balance is quite positive. And how has this favored population in terms of access to new technologies? And actually, this is very positive. So the Genoma project has this goal, mapping population. So we have a multi-ethnic feature that requires more knowledge on diseases, etc. And we certainly will be able to attain that. But what I wanted to comment on and hear you on this is that we were somewhat classified as industrial complex PDP. PDP is more of an instrument for that. We had opportunity when we had the vaccines for COVID-19. So of using an instrument that is provided by the law, which is technological order. So I had the opportunity in my final period at the ministry of receiving, along with the city, with the Camille, Dr. Camille, we started taking the first steps of the technological order. I see this as a very valuable instrument for that. So then we can go to innovation. So state taking part in the development of technology. I'd like to hear of the other instruments of the complex issues or aspects in health. So it has to be part of public policies. It has to have continuous improvement, and other instruments that are expected to happen. Well, perfectly put, Denizar. The Oxford vaccine is a technological order along with Fiocruz Institute or Foundation. And this criticism is totally correct. Public policies to discuss health has to go beyond this partnership or development program. For a whole year, we focused exclusively on it, and we missed some opportunities of leveraging other topics and also innovation, because this type of partnership is a possibility of having new technologies, but not of new drugs or new devices and new products for health that are not yet available in society. And then this sense, Denizar, I believe that it's actually being, today what we have a legal framework that enables or allows for that. So our policy, the national policy of innovation in health, it has three major instruments. So they have PDP, that is one, this partnership. The other one is technological order, and another instrument, as it's being done for radiotherapy. So we have one or two manufacturers you try to attract to Brazil production development, a kind of offset for a relevant acquisition of products, as it happened with linear accelerators. And there's technological order. So actually we have three instruments to be used, if I'm not mistaken, perhaps. The Oxford vaccine has been the first contract of a technological order by the ministry, and so we have a long way to go here, Denizar. What would this enable? Looking from the BNDES, glasses and other institutions would do the same. If we have technological order or commission from the Ministry of Health that identifies a demand in healthcare that is very clear, relevant technology for the country, I believe this guides and conditions the efforts and prioritizes the efforts of the other institutions so that funds can actually be driven to that initiative. So we have all this pathway, the financing, mobilize and visa, the surveillance agency, obviously the Ministry of Health, and we end up having a much more effective result. I think these initiatives or these priorities that may come from the Ministry of Health, we are using the ministry, and so we have the ministry as the defense ministry in some cases. So we have similar policies. So other ministries do not have this feature of taking the industry. The health ministry does not. It can actually lead to these partnerships and also innovation. You, Denizar, are totally correct in actually bringing out this topic, and this mobilizes institutions. I've mentioned here that it prioritizes funds and also other things. So BNDES works with funds, but we have non-reimbursable funds that are quite significant, certain stakes in certain funds, market instruments, we go within the innovation policy. So just something, the last thing you've mentioned, the Genome project, which is an initiative that is incredible. It was launched last year. So it's called Genomes Brazil, and the ministry has been taking several measures, and the BNDES should launch in a short period of time. We actually were going to have a meeting tomorrow with the researchers and the ministry to define the last details of a public bid of 50 million reais for supporting non-reimbursable funds for genome sequencing in Brazil, due to everything that you've said here. Considering the diversity of the Brazilian population, this is a project that puts Brazil and our public health system in future medicine and will provide the grounds, the fact that we have a genetic database of Brazilian population with ethnic mix that we have with features that are so heterogeneous. We're going to have a base that will be fantastic for us to move forward once again in innovation with new drugs, new therapies, cell therapies, and this will be the basis for future medicine. And we should shortly have the launch of this tender along with the Ministry of Health.
So great and fantastic, João, to be together in this initiative in the Brazilian genome, and it's an innovative program, but puts Brazil and the public health system in state-of-the-art innovation. And we're in the middle of the pandemic, but this was a fantastic initiative put forth by the Health Ministry. When we talk about non-reimbursable funds and the National Development Bank, BNDES, is at the cornerstone of this issue. The bank, the National Development Bank, plays a role in which we have thousands of neglected diseases, and it's not only neglected by big pharma, but we have some experience with drugs for resistant TB and specific dengue fevers, Zika fever programs, and that is essential. So there is a scenario of diseases in the Southern Hemisphere that is different from the Northern Hemisphere. So what is your take on this debate on non-redeemable funds with these experiences that you have with neglected diseases? Thank you, Denizar. It is a very timely topic. If you are not aware of what the bank's FundTech is, our National Development Fund, a bank, allocates part of profits to funds that are non-redeemable funds. Part of these funds are funds for technological innovation called BNDES FundTech to leverage these funds, and health is one of the priorities, and it is one of the areas in which we use these funds for innovation, and we always have a new approach for these funds, and we can finance initiatives that will be neglected otherwise if it weren't for these non-reimbursable funds. And we can put innovation and social impact together. So what is the importance of neglected diseases in this landscape for FundTech? And as you mentioned, we have 3 major neglected diseases. We have a gigantic tropical disease burden, as you mentioned. And there is a number of projects funded, and we will have a new round for new projects for schistosomiasis. There is a very interesting project for the fact that there's no compliance with children because the medication tastes awful. For resistant TB, as you mentioned, we have a project sponsored with Fiocruz and ANDI with DNDI, which is an important partner of Médecins Sans Frontières that is specialized in neglected disease, DNDI. And we have academic competency. We have a fantastic experience in non-communicative diseases, and we have institutions like the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, state-of-the-art agencies and institutions, and many others. And of course, many funds want to put these products in their portfolio, and we should remember that we also develop INFAS. It is also interesting because of that. We have non-redeemable funds for the development of innovative disease input, and neglected diseases are not an interesting issue for big pharmas, and there is tremendous prevalence here in Brazil. So this will, of course, be one of our key interests. And what is the general scenario here at Fundec? Well, we have a guideline at the bank, at the National Bank, to foster partnerships to leverage non-redeemable funds made available by the bank. So we have a counterpart by the partner. So every real invested by the bank, the counterpart invests 1 real of these funds allocated. So we entered into an agreement with ENTREPRENEURSHIP to allocate funds, and we allocate part of the funds and they allocate the counterpart. So with this approach, we leverage resources, and we are really focusing on this partnership with ENTREPRENEURSHIP, and we are looking at strategic funding for the health care service sector. And amongst neglected diseases, the pandemic exposed the fragility and the urgent need of the Brazilian political structure. And with this partnership with ENTREPRENEURSHIP will focus on bridging the gap in this area with fantastic potential for public health in Brazil, for the Ministry of Health, vaccines, independency in diagnosis. There is a lack of reagents here in Brazil, so we need to be more independent in diagnostic areas. And the objective we have is to leverage, allocate funds for neglected diseases, trying to leverage resources made available through these partnerships. And to conclude, Denizar, our National Development Bank, together with the Ministry of Health, is the sponsor of the dengue fever vaccine developed by Butantan Lab, and we expect that next year, the most, we will be able to register dengue fever's vaccine. That it'll be, I mean, a gigantic accomplishment by Brazilian scientists. And the development was homemade by Butantan Lab. It's totally 100% Brazilian science. So I believe that we will really have great news in 2022. And Zika fever, we are developing currently new diagnostic tools because it's very difficult to make a difference between all of these tropical fevers, dengue fever, chikungunya fever, Zika fever, and we are creating a test that will give us the possibility to make a quick diagnosis available in the public health system. João, fantastic. I mean, we're really making gigantic steps forwards in public health. So this is the last minute, unfortunately, of our 30 minutes. I just want to focus on something that you mentioned, João, which is the role played by ENTREPRENEURSHIP. ENTREPRENEURSHIP has been really leveraged by the health sector because ENTREPRENEURSHIP can reproduce what Embraer did in the airplane business, what Embrapa does in the agribusiness, and ENTREPRENEURSHIP, which is the national agency for the development of health sciences, will be fantastic. And everything that you mentioned with neglected diseases and drugs. So, well, this is it. And your take-home message, João. Well, Denizar, I would like to thank you. I mean, it was so fast. We could spend days talking about these topics, fantastic topics. I mean, the role of government in financing and innovation. It's such a momentous topic, and we have the chance and the opportunity to bring back to the conversation table the need to invest in innovation, in strategic products for the public health program due to the fragility of the system exposed in the pandemic. The National Development Bank, it is totally available and is fostering and working to make available resources and instruments to leverage activities for agencies to make progress in this end. Thank you, Denizar. Thank you, João. And thank you very much, you at the industry development sector at the bank. And thank you very much, João, for your participation.